finally found occasion to break the seal on a pack of cigarettes that had been kind of lost in my closet. I had stuffed them in the pocket of a raincoat. And anybody that lives in LA knows that you just don't really wear raincoats ever. Even when it rains, because you just want to get wet. Anyway, I was rifling through my closet and I don't know, I was admiring the raincoat. It's a really nice one. I tried it on and I stuffed my hands in the pockets and I was like, oh shit. And it was a particularly tough week. And so I was like, fuck it. And I went outside and found a nice little spot. And I had a cigarette. It was so good. It was so delicious. It was exactly what I wanted. And so I waited a whole day before having my second cigarette. And my second cigarette, I went to this rooftop of a parking structure. And I knew there were going to be no cars around. It was this great big area to just walk around. And I put on a song in my headphones there, and I just enjoyed a nice tune and lit up a cigarette and just paced around listening to some really nice music, enjoying each drag, you know, and just luxuriating in the cinematic experience, you know, just the dramatic, just the romantic, like, you know, it's like a state of reverie. You're just kind of like, my buddy Matt says, he was like, oh, I love Gaulois. They're like smoked duck. It's like this rich cigarette, gives you kind of a head rush. It's just like really intensely strong, delicious, flavorful cigarette. Gaulois, French. Probably pronouncing it wrong. Anyway, I was having my smoked duck experience. You know, just like breathing it in, taking it deep, going for the flavor and the robustness of it. And getting kind of a head rush because it's been like years since I've had a cigarette. And then I waited. Another... No, I think that day I had 2. And then probably on the third day I had 3. Anyway, it was about a half a pack, and I polished that baby off. And it was... When I came down to my last cigarette, it was like a celebratory cigarette because I had just finished shooting. I had offered to shoot some animation for a friend's project. And it was kind of hanging over my head, and I just kind of didn't really want to do it. And I waited till the very last week. And I kept sort of, justifying not doing it. And then I finally was like, I have to fucking do this. And I kind of shit it out. It was a little sloppy, but it had some energy to it, so I didn't feel horrible. But when it was done, I knew I had all this other shit I had to do. But it was like, it was, what do they call that? When you eat a little wasabi between bites of food, because it kind of cleanses your palate. The pickled ginger, I mean. You have a little slice of pickled ginger, between your savory and your sweet or whatever, just to kind of... It was like a palate cleanse between projects. I was like, and we just don't have these rituals enough anymore. It's like the artist needs to sort of be in states of reverie, states of meditation, states of muse, getting in touch with the feeling of making the thing. We're not robots. We're humans having a human experience and sharing that thing that makes us human with one another. And you can't do it like, rapidly taking a shit after a cup of strong coffee. Just shit it out. Although that is fun too. Shits can do that. Shits can be, bookends, little chapter endings. Oh, okay, and shit. Anyway, starting the new project today. I was storyboarding for it, and it was fun. It was fun to dust off the old drawing habits and make a little thumbnail, a drawing that you're not going to get frustrated over whether it's good or bad. It just serves it's like a placeholder for something else. And to me, my storyboards aren't meant to inspire genius. I have an idea, some sort of foggy inclination of what I'm going for, and then I just doodle something as a placeholder. Because when I work with a DP, if I'm going to direct something and I'm working with a DP, I'm finding everything. What lens, how close or far away are we getting at? What millimeter lens is right? What I want to do to the image. Do I want it shallow depth of field? Do I want to see what's everything? I want everything sharp. Do I want a wide angle view? Do I want, how dynamic are we getting? And what is the purpose of this point of view? I don't think enough filmmakers ask themselves that. What is the do you want the viewer to be, a fly on the wall, listening in? Do you want the viewer to participate? To be on the ride with the people? Do you want that sort of separated, objective, cold, objectification? I mean, stop motion's funny because it's all objects. We objectify the main character is an object. It's a symbol of a character. It's an inanimate, symbolic representation of something else that moves. We're moving objects around, right? Isn't that the whole point? So, how intimate, or sometimes you just want to look at the object and admire it. Like full body shot of a character standing in beautiful light, to just be You know, almost like the audience is walking by a sculpture and just going, huh, admiring that piece of sculpture. And what's great about stop motion is you're eliciting all these other experiences. Like sometimes you want to remind people, like, all right, don't get too lost. We're staring at objects. And other times you want to get lost in the dream where you forget that you're staring at objects. And of course, there's the building of emotion. You know, spatially tiptoeing up upon a feeling. Dread. Anxiety that hangs there. And so maybe the camera is the atmosphere. That's how I tried to treat the camera on Fred. I just said, okay, this is the atmosphere. You've got the characters, the environment, and then you have the atmosphere. And the camera is going to represent the atmosphere. And that can be slow-moving smoke or haze in the room. That can be the feeling that you get in your stomach when you step into a space. You know? I forget the author, but he describes like driving by a car wreck and just that atmosphere. And how do you bottle that? You know, how do you decide where and how you want to look at this? Or even, do you even want to look at it? Maybe you want to look at the result of it. You know, like the sirens or the flashing lights on the faces of the people looking on. Maybe that's all you need. Anyway, I just, this is what day one of no more cigarettes, and I just walked through an alley, and somebody had just had a cigarette, and I was just like, oh God, just soaking it through my nose, like, God, how I love thee. And I see people vaping, and I feel really bad for them. I'm like, why would you forfeit that experience? Why would you substitute a cigarette for that water vapor with nicotine in it or whatever it is? I don't know, flavored bullshit. It's not better for you. I mean, they've done all these studies about vaping, and that vaping is fucking awful for your lungs. You know, you're introducing this like sticky chemical to the sacs in your lungs. Just like, ugh. Might as well just put a little smoke in there. And but it's all probably not very good for the practice of breathing. You know, if you're into breathing, I'm into breathing. I like to breathe. I like to meditate, breath work, and all that shit. Definitely, I'm feeling a little less able to breathe just after a week of smoking, mildly smoking. God, if I could just mildly smoke like that, that would be my whole life. Just if I could just limit it to one cigarette a day or every other day, I don't know. I might buy a pack and just see if I can do it. This fucking podcast goes nowhere, I swear to God. It just always goes back to vices. Why would you sit and listen to somebody else fetishize some fucking vice? You know, that isn't good for you. It isn't like reading. Actually, I'm reading a great book right now. I'm reading Cocktails with George and Martha by Philip Gefter. And it's all about making Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is an Edward Albee play that was turned into a movie by Mike Nichols in the early 60s, starring the Burtons, actually Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. When they were married, they were the Burtons. But they had an on-again, off-again love affair that was pretty steamy and raunchy and horrid and wonderful. Passionate lovers, you know. And I just love how humans get when they're just unadulterated and just fucking in the throes of passion. And George and Martha are like a married couple that are just at each other's throats in this wonderful movie. Mike Nichols. I haven't seen the play or read the play. I'm sure it's fantastic, but this book kind of celebrates that picture. I love that movie. It's one of those movies that it's really fun to watch on a hangover. Like if you're just fucking just out of your mind, hung out, you can't leave your house and you want to see something just really gut-wrenching and horrible, put that baby on. It'll fuck you up in a good way. Yeah, what else is happening? I want to see some movies. I gotta go to the movies and see some fucking movies. I was gonna see this movie, oh man, it's a Brazilian film. Secret Agent. It just looks good. I forget what the filmmaker's name is, but he's this Brazilian guy. And the lead actor is just so magnetic. He's so fun to look at. And it's shot like rich tobacco. It's like all these like earth tones, and it's kind of that sepia color look. You know, just lots of rich, you know, charcoaly blacks and just sweaty faces, and then there's this, I think it's a Korean film that looks pretty good. God, what's the name of that film? I Had to Do It or something. And like the poster is like this dad holding like a flower pot over his head, like he's ready to kill somebody with a flower pot. Anyway, it looks kind of good. Totally opposite. Super modern looking the way it's shot. Lots of blues. I love the whole, like, you know, color theory around film. And speaking of color, Blue Moon looks kind of interesting. I've always rooting for Linklater to make a good movie. I like a lot of his films. I like his boldness and what he attempts to do as an artist. And this one looks kind of fun. I'm not a huge Ethan Hawke fan, but I like that he's got, like, he's middle-aged and kind of balding and, like, diminutive, and it looks like he's got a little short man's complex or something. But that one looks kind of good. That's another one of those, like, gut-wrenching love stories, maybe. There's a lot of films out about process, like pulling off a caper. Yeah, I don't know. Film. You gotta watch films sometimes to keep yourself inspired. Especially if you're gonna attempt to make film. I also want to see Hamnet. Looks so good. Jesus Christ. Looks like, talk about gut wrenching. Jeez, that one looks. If you have kids, don't watch Hamnet, I suppose. Yeah. Living in the dream, living in the spaces between the waking and the dreaming. What is that pressing your heart against the screen feel like? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? Oftentimes you're just trying to fill in. Like you have this point A to point B and you're filling in. But or it's just part of the dream. I wrote something and I see it. I see every single shot. I don't see what the shots mean. That's not how those visions kind of squeezed out of me. I just see it. And when I read the script, I'm like, oh, I see each and every shot the same almost every time. Like, here's where I'm going to push in. Here's where I'm just going to see his eyes and a little piece of what he's working on. Here's where I'm going to frame the two people in the hatchback of a car. Here's where I'm going to encroach on the edge of frame with a little detail that's out of focus to remind you of this object that's sort of hovering in the scene. Here's a bunch of fast cuts, him rifling through his drawers looking for matches. He finds one lonely, sad match, and he strikes it, and he sort of slowly lifts it. And I just see the camera sort of petting up with the flame. And right before it makes contact with this lonely cigarette, just kind of branching out of his fucking cold, dry, lonely lips. Honk, honk. He shudders and wiggles, and the match goes out. And when you know it, his date is there in the driveway. It's not a hot, happy date. It's this annoying date that he's having with his colleague, friend. Just stuff. You know what I mean? Like dreams. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing some storyboarding, and it's for a music video. And it's like feeling around in the dark. Some of it just comes naturally, and some of it you gotta really, really work for. And ask yourself, like, why am I here? What am I trying to say with this? What am I inviting the audience to feel by being here, not over there, here? And how do you achieve, that dizziness, like where you feel weightless for a moment, almost like you're not in control of your body. You know, when you're staggering backwards and you've leaned a little too far into your heels, and there's a slow motion feeling in your mind for a moment, like, oh, I'm gonna fucking biff it. It's that moment before you actually biff it, before gravity takes back hold of. It's that teetering on the edge. How do you achieve that? You know? Is it a slow roll while you're trucking sideways? What is that feeling of sort of careening out of control feel like before the moment reminds you that, yes, you are going to make impact with the ground, and it's going to hurt? It's that weightless moment. Everybody knows what that feels like. It's that falling feeling right before you wake up from a dream, where you fall off some stairs, fall off a bridge, fall off a building, fall off a hot air balloon, fall off a chair onto your ass.